Okay, this is actually the third time I've tried to record this video, so I've wasted about an hour now trying to get this done. So hopefully this one will work. So we're going to look at the jump videos, and I'm going to give you pretty quick feedback on it, especially on these first half because I'm pretty comfortable talking about them now. Okay, so Rachel, biggest things I notice on yours, you have a lot of twinning. Your poses are very symmetrical. So yeah, like this is very similar. This very similar. All of this is very similar, and the poses just kind of aren't very dynamic in that way. So there, like one foot's a little bit further behind, but I think you really just need to kind of break them up, make them a little asymmetrical, and just think of ways you could make this more interesting. So this pose here, I mean, just start the foot a little further back. Um, you know, something like this is the character leaning back a little bit. If so, what's the arms doing? I don't know. That's not a great example of the pose, but just by playing around with stuff, like right now it's straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, straight line, and it's feeling very straight line, straight line, straight line. So it's feeling very boxy, and is not as interesting to look at. So really, like, make these poses dynamic. Like the poses that you did for the pose exercise, and the poses that we had to do for those are examples of like that type of attention is what you need to give to every pose in your entire animation. The next thing is the character kind of seems to slow down as he lands here, or it lands here, kind of comes to the ground, and then before it even gets to the ground, it starts slowing down. And so when you look at ease in and ease out, let's redraw this. The character is coming in toward this landing here, right? And I would expect these poses here to be kind of close together because they're kind of hovering, but then they should get, like the gap between them should get bigger, right? Like this space should get bigger each time, even though it really didn't on that last one for me. And then, they get smaller here. And so it's not really happening. What's happening on this one is more of something like this, like as they get closer to the end, the gaps are getting smaller and closer to that. So I think so I'd say work on that, work on the dynamic poses. And I think something that this is just a consistent note that I've been giving on a lot of these. Things seem to start and stop all at the same time. So they hit that pose together, and every limb, every body part in the whole character hits that pose and starts changing. And then they all hit this pose together, and then they all hit this pose together, and then they all hit this pose together, and then they all hit this pose together. And you see that everything just kind of starts and stops and changes directions all at the same time. And so just offsetting stuff in time really will make that much better and make it feel much more loose. The last thing I would say on this one is really focus on your arcs. So if we look at this one, the character kind of pops up here and then just stops moving forward for a while and then shoots forward. And then if you were to draw this arc of the character's hips, I think it's going to look something like this, right? And what we're really wanting is something more like this. Okay. So just paying attention to arcs. When you animate, also your arms are definitely an IK. And if we look at as we move the character, I'm sorry, no, this one isn't the one with the arms and the IK. I'm sorry, I've done these too many times. So, otherwise, this one's feeling pretty good. But really, kind of think about the character's arm arcs as well. Okay, so I think that's all really good on that one. Where are we at? Ryan. I'm getting very efficient at re-critiquing all of these, like on the third time around here. So I think the walk looks good. It's got sort of this macho like swagger. And I think your poses are good. There are two really big things that I think kind of stick out to me. One is this. I think this character is just too far forward, and he just wouldn't be able to recover from this. So I think, move the hips back this way just a little bit. I also think that something else you could do is you could consider taking this leg and put it back behind him, so he's kind of, kicking it back here, trying to balance himself out. I think that would probably help that balance out a little bit. And this pose isn't the best in the world in that we get this hand sort of like some of this stuff here is kind of hard to read. So maybe go back and play with that posing a little bit. The jumps, so let's kind of look at what happens here. It looks like the feet are sticking and that's what's causing the character to move in space, right? Because if this was pushing, it would continue to push to here, and then it would just sort of follow the character up. But instead, the character's hips stop moving, and it feels like that stopping of moving is what causes the leg to break loose and suck up into the. So it's like, and it like sort of pops up to him, right? Sorry, that was. I'm in a sound effect mood today. And then the same here, like the cast the leg out, and it feels like the leg sticks and sucks the character back in. And the reason this is happening is one, like if we get to here, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's six frames there where the hips don't really move in space. Like they're just kind of locked there in position. They're not going up, they're not going forward. They're kind of wiggling a little bit, but it's not really moving like gravity's affecting it. And so when the leg sticks and then it immediately sucks them down, that's what makes it feel like that's the force that's pulling them. Okay, so I think just wait until the hips start to drop and then stretch the leg forward. And it may even be this far, but I think that's just a little extreme. I think I would have the character starting to fall and then stick out the leg. Okay, so we got another one there. It's a little less, but you see it again, like the hips stick in space and then it sucks it down. And same here. So you kind of know how to go forward with that. The last thing is the character kind of gasps for air and then makes this face. And so I don't know. So there's this thing in acting where acting is reacting, and so the character is almost reacting to the person looking at the camera, right there. And so when he does that, it's like how does he know the camera is even there? Because he's looking at something over here, right? So I think just having the eyes kind of positioned on us a little bit more, like he sees us, would be beneficial. Um, and this is something too. It all just kind of hits at the end. So maybe having the thumb hit first and then the rest of the body just kind of catch up with it or something like that. Just keep it all from hitting at the same time. Okay, close. Joe. So I ended up resizing this one a little bit. It was a little large file size wise. So overall, this one looks pretty good. You got a lot of good energy flowing through it, and the timing seems pretty good. I think you got some good poses too. This one's a big offender though for everything hitting at the same time. So like both the feet hit at the same time. At the same time, the hands go back, and then this is actually feeling pretty good. I feel like he kind of slows down right here, so I feel like the ability to slide that far is a stretch. So I feel like I'd maybe cut it off right here, maybe have him stand up a little earlier, make this table thing shorter. And then you get this pop here, so it goes from there to there in one frame. And so I think that you need to kind of ease that in a little bit, and I think you need to make it feel like the upper body is sort of throwing itself forward. Maybe something a little bit more like this, kind of throwing itself forward over this this leg to sort of compensate and be able to stand up, right? And then again, we all, so we get this, both feet come off the ground at the same time. And so we had this here earlier, I think, when this character comes in, have one foot hit the ground first and then followed by the second one. This one's not feeling too bad at the beginning, and then, so right here, they both come off at the same time, so I think you need to hold maybe the left foot down a little longer so it feels like it's sort of pushing off on the ground here as the character's jumping. And then both the feet just kind of like settle in there, and the hips do too. So when you look at the arc of this, it feels like that, and then it like flattens out. And I think what you would want is more like that, and then maybe flatten out and dip in. So just kind of cleaning up that arc a little bit. And then again, this foot holds there longer, but it doesn't feel like it's pushing because it's still bent. So I think just a frame or two here past this, just to have the character just sort of push off with sort of a stiff leg here, would really sort of launch the character forward in this front flip. And then again, everything hitting at the same time, right there, both feet. So I mean, this is a great opportunity for this foot to hit first, and then this foot to follow up later. And so, you know, this is just you just need to do some offsetting on this to really loosen it up. Make sure that the force is being directed through the character. So this is something that we're just seeing in a lot of these. So that's something to think about, is when everything is hitting and how to consider the forces that are acting on the character. Peter, let's open up this. Click time. Okay. So we are going to hit play. So really just two notes I have. One is this weight here. When the character gets here on this leg, I feel like, you know, if this is the source of the weight going straight up, obviously there's a lot of the character hanging out on this side but not on this side. And so it feels like it's just going to teeter him over this way. I would consider just sort of how you can either push him over, or we can consider making the spine a little more dynamic. So maybe if it's a little bit more like, you know, this type of pose, then we can throw some of the character's weight over to this side of the leg, and that will help, you know, kind of balance it out a little bit. So so that brings us to the second thing. I think a lot of the poses, when it comes to the torso, head, and arms, are just feeling a little linear, or not linear, a little simple and like not very dynamic. So if we look at a lot of the torso poses are this. I could just get this egg shape. So it's like, you know, this is the torso pose neutral. This is the torso pose stretched, and then this is the torso pose squashed. Like it's still all kind of the same variation of the same thing. And what we need is more stuff like this, you know, where the torso is bending, and you're just not getting very much of that in there. So I think really just, what's going on? For some reason my phone just decided to restart itself. So I think doing some of that will really make these poses more dynamic, because if we look at a lot of this, it's just a lot of this straight up and down, and your arms are a little stiff too throughout most of the animation. So I think really just playing around with that, making the poses a little more dynamic overall. Push it until you break it, and then pull back. Like don't worry too much about breaking it. Like it's much easier to pull back than to add more. Okay, do. Okay, so another example, sort of some symmetrical poses and sort of everything hitting at the same time. So everything hits at the same time. This one's a really noticeable one because we go, okay, so from here, hits at the same time, changes directions. Hits at the same time, changes directions. Hits, changes. Hits, changes. And so we can see all of these like happening together. And so especially because we have some somewhat repetitive poses here, that feels like that's ping-ponging, right? Dun, dun, dun. So it just feels like, just because these poses aren't being sort of made more dynamic, we can see how it gets a little stiff and robotic. So something like just have one foot further in front of the other, make the character spine a little more dynamic in its pose. So, you know, instead of this, maybe it's, you know, leaning over a little bit more, and looking forward. I don't know. You're just going to play with the pose a little bit more and make it a little bit more dynamic. And then the last thing I would say is right here on this. It doesn't really feel like there's very much squash there. Like the character should squash down just a little bit more so he has enough force to kind of push off. And then when he does push off, I feel like his butt is still toward us a little bit too much, and it should be more like toward this way with the legs like reaching this way. So that's my 2 cents on that. Is like it feels like it's not rolled all the way over yet, like it hasn't shifted the weight to the other side of the character. And that will really help when you're doing this kind of animation, because if you have the character favoring those, then you're going to get this feeling that it's like flowing through the arc as it goes over to the next pose. So let's go ahead and hit that. Let's see if I can make it all the way through these here. Herschel, we're going to look really quickly. Yeah, so this one opens weird inside of QuickTime, but you know what it looks like in the regular video. So a couple of big offenders on yours. I think you get a couple of things that sort of stops and starts all at the same time again. You have this issue here where the character's reaching down with its foot, but the hips are just staying locked in space. And then the left leg almost comes off the ground and the hips are still locked in space before it drops. So I think you need to sort of be reaching down with the hips too. Like the hips need to be sinking as he reaches down for that blue cylinder. And I think this maybe is one of those you just need to go through and do some reference to see how that step down would look. The last thing I would say is the arms. I can tell that the arms are an IK. And the reason I can tell that the arms are an IK are two different things. One, it always feels like the thing that is making the arms move is out there past the arms. Okay, so look how the arms move. It's like the hands are leading the motion, pulling the arm forward. And so what that feels like is something is tied to the hand and it's yanking it around everywhere. Like there's some object back here in space pulling on it. And that's because it is. That's where the controller is and it's pulling on it. And so so it doesn't feel like the shoulder is rotating and causing the other parts of the arm to move. And that's one of the dangers of working in IK. The other thing is, like, let's just do a quick plot here of the position of the arm. Okay, there. We go forward to the next one. There. Go forward to the next one. Let's see. There. So we draw that line. It's a straight line, right? But we learned in the 12 principles of animation that things move in arcs, right? And so that linear motion just feels really stiff, it goes against that entire principle. So you can use IK, but you really have to force that stuff to happen. And it's much easier when the arms aren't attached to stuff to just go ahead and use FK. So that would be my 2 cents on that. Natalie. Oh yeah. And by the way, Herschel, the reason your video was looking like that was probably a codec issue. So QuickTime has problems with certain codecs. So Natalie, let's look at this one. This is actually looking really good. I think you got some really good poses in here, really good timing in here. And you can just see that just by having good poses and good timing, that gets you a long way. Couple of things here. Oh, I just saw this one for the first time. In this pose, your arms are kind of doing this. So maybe think about kind of playing with the clavicle, pushing this one up a little bit. Maybe even pushing that one down, so what you get is a nicer flow up the arm here. So looking at this, the character comes down, hits the ground. So I think this is one that could really benefit now in what I would call a polish pass, where you're actually, but really it's splining, where you're actually going through and making sure that everything kind of hits at a different time. So for example, as the character comes down here, everything just kind of hits. So like the torso, the head, the arms all hit, pop up together, pop down together. And so everything kind of hits at the same time. So imagine this instead, if that body hit, then the left arm hit, the next frame, and then the right arm hit the next frame, and then the foot hit the next frame. And so instead of this like bump bump feel to it, you get this crump crump, like it's just going to have this more like this nice texture to it. This, and so that's going to feel more random and more organic, like there's forces that are causing this to happen. It's the force of the torso hitting the ground that's going to cause the arms to bounce off the ground. And so you got a couple other things in this sort of leaps. So the arms hit together, change directions together, hit together, change directions together. So so you get a little bit of that going on in here too, and you really need to kind of just make it offset just a little bit. And it's even just like just shifting some keys around just a little bit will really do a world of good on this. So so I'm going to go ahead and stop the video now. Hopefully it won't crash. If it does, then I'll be very upset. So.